Ladies and gentlemen, our next talk will be on building the Bitcoin technical community, and that will be led by Nifty. A round of applause for Nifty, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Hey, how many of you here? Well, hang on, it's working. Oh, incredible. Okay, cool. So I'm here to talk to you about developing Bitcoin. How many of you here would call yourselves a developer? A handful of people. How many of you use Bitcoin though? Almost everyone. So I think a lot of us rely on Bitcoin developers, more or less, to use Bitcoin every day. I'm going to be talking today about Bitcoin Plus Plus, which is a global developer conference series that I started in Austin, Texas in 2022. Let's see what else is in there. Oh, since then, since 2022, I've run 17 events in over 10 countries. Our 17th event just happened for the first time in Africa last week, right here in Nairobi, Kenya. So very excited to be here with you guys, celebrating all of the amazing development work that is happening both locally here in the African and Nairobi community, as well as globally. So as you can imagine, I travel a lot and talk to a lot of Bitcoin developers across the globe. What I want to give for you guys today is a little bit of a preview about what's happening or what we did at Bitcoin Plus Plus just last year, which I realize now is about 6 months ago. So this is what the number of speakers that we had come to our conferences. We ran 6 events last year. We had 160 speakers, 135 of them, it was their first time on a Bitcoin Plus Plus stage. So it's a large community of people. We had 25 repeat speakers, 7 events, and we were in 6 different countries. So hoping to really illustrate that the Bitcoin developer community is very large. It's very global, and they're working on a lot of different projects. This is I don't know if you guys can see this. This is just like a highlight of some of the projects that our speakers contributed to in 2025. So one of the big ones, Bitcoin. How many of you know what Bitcoin is? It's Bitcoin Core. Here's a question. How many of you run a node or know someone that runs a Bitcoin node? Handful of people. This is what you're running typically when you run a Bitcoin node. How many of you have or know someone who runs a Lightning node? Handful. So this might be one of the projects that they're running. So a lot of the people that show up to our conferences are building and contributing to the infrastructure that makes all of the work and the economies that we're building locally on the ground possible. And a lot of them come to our conferences to talk about their work. So what I want to do with the rest of my time is give you kind of 5 trends that I've seen happening in Bitcoin development, just based on talking to and hanging out with developers in the last year. I've kind of thought it would be fun to call this a report from Insider Edition. So we started at Bitcoin Plus Plus, like a news arm to help report on what's happening with the developers in the ecosystem last year. It's called Insider Edition. So this is our first field report on Bitcoin development. There's 5 things I want to kind of talk through. The first one is the Bitcoin protocol. So this is the actual instructions, or when you're making a Bitcoin transaction, well, how is that transaction put together? We call that the protocol. All of the Bitcoin nodes more or less understand the same protocol. That's what lets them conduct transactions together. We call it consensus. So just as an update on the protocol, there were no changes made to how the Bitcoin protocol works in 2025. But there is a lot of work going on. So even though the main protocol hasn't changed, the infrastructure around the Bitcoin protocol has been getting lots of work. So if developers aren't working on the protocol, what are they working on? Lots of other projects. So I have a list here of stuff that they're working on. Fuzzing is something that helps us make sure that the software we're running has no bugs, which means that there's no vulnerabilities. It gives us a lot of assurance that the software is working as intended, which for Bitcoin means that your money stays where it's supposed to. The Fiber Network is a really cool project. It was started by Matt Corallo, who's a longtime Bitcoin developer, I want to say about a decade ago. This is a way of sending Bitcoin blocks around the globe really quickly so that all of the Bitcoin nodes can stay up to date with what the current state of the network is, and trying to make the network more resilient to failures in the internet. Mempool relay, this has to do with, oh, thank you. Hello? Okay. Mempool relay, that's better. Mempool relay has to do with sending transactions. Silent payments is a way that you can transact on chain more privately and without having to worry about updating your Bitcoin address. And I don't remember. Oh, MPC is not the AI thing. This has to do with basically breaking Bitcoin Core up so that more developers can build on it as a platform. Multi-party compute. No, it's not. It's multi-process computation. Yeah. It's it's different. There's a lot of NPCs. It's good. But it's multi-process because it's infrastructure stuff. So in addition to working on things kind of on the edges of the protocol, even though protocol hasn't changed, the conversations are continuing. People are talking about ways that we can change the Bitcoin protocol, and this is a lot of what people come to our conferences to talk about. There's been a big revival in the BIPs, or Bitcoin improvement proposals. This is where we write down the rules of how, or proposals of how to change the protocol. So there's been a lot more work in merging new proposals and adding them to the repository. Covenants would be a way to make more expressive Bitcoin contracts. There's a proposal to do a fork to Bitcoin that would clean up a lot of edge cases that might cause problems on the network. And then another proposal to change how script works so you could have more expressive things on Bitcoin. One thing that I've noticed talking to developers is that when new developers are coming into the space, a lot of them tend to end up working on protocols that aren't Bitcoin directly, but things that are like still in the same ecosystem. Lightning would be an example of that. Nostr is something that people go and tend to spend a lot of time on. Cashew, and that's because these protocols are a bit newer. There's more things to change, and there's a lot less work to get consensus on the changes. So as new people come into the ecosystem, they're more likely than not going to be contributing to a project which is in the ecosystem of Bitcoin rather than directly on the protocol itself. Cool. So that's my update on protocols. The next thing that I've noticed, one of the trends, is Bitcoin clients. So a lot of people talked about, raise their hands when I asked if you run a Bitcoin Core node. There's a talk in the developer community about whether or not there should be one project called Bitcoin Core that everyone's running for a node, or maybe there should be other projects that also understand how the Bitcoin protocol works. Maybe they're written in a different language, run by a different developer team. There's a lot of conversations and work on other implementations. I think the reality is that even today, there is already a diversity of clients that allow you to run a Bitcoin node. There's BTCD written in Go. There's a project called libbitcoin, which is rewriting the Bitcoin project, I think also in C++. You can't see it, but Rust Bitcoin is an implementation of the Bitcoin protocol in Rust, and it's really fully fleshed out and used in a lot of projects today. So the reality on the ground is that there are a lot of clients already. And then there's some really cool projects inside the Bitcoin Core organization, which KG referenced, the multi-process comms or MPC project, along with the libbitcoin kernel project, which is an internal to Bitcoin Core project. The idea with this is it will create more of a platform that new developers can create interesting things with Bitcoin, like indexes, ways to look at blocks, so more visualizations. Then they can build it on top of a strong consensus foundation without having to reinvent it. So hopefully this will give new developers in this space more opportunities to innovate and contribute and build their own software without having to worry about staying in consensus. So it's kind of a cool project. I'm not going to talk about that in this one. 3, cryptography. So how many of you have heard that Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency? Pretty much everyone. The crypto in cryptocurrency stands for cryptography, right? So when Bitcoin came out around, I think the white paper, I'm really bad at dates, but I think it came out in 2009. When that came out, the kind of cryptography that Satoshi chose to use for securing Bitcoin was something called elliptic curves. In 2009, this was extremely cutting edge cryptography and was very exciting. 2009 was how many years ago? Someone help me with math? 17 years ago. How many of you think that phone technology from 17 years ago is still exciting and new? All right, Kiji, we have a few handfuls here. We have our contrarians in every crowd. That's fine. So for cryptographers, when Bitcoin came out, it was new and exciting. But as you can imagine, in the decades since then, it's been cryptographers don't find the type of crypto in Bitcoin very interesting. So they've been spending their time in academia and et cetera on other things. Just in the last year, there have been some new things kind of discovered. Well, there's a couple threads that are making the cryptography of Bitcoin exciting again, which is cool. So now we're starting to see renewed interest from career cryptographers in what's going on in Bitcoin. So we're starting to see them showing up more at conferences. Bitcoin cryptography is cool again. Only took 17 years to come all the way around. I know they say most fashion is 20-year cycles. Maybe cryptography is the same. Some of these are keywords. I'm going to admit I don't fully understand how they work, but here's what's showing up at our events: something called witness encryption, which is a fancy way of being able to do interesting computation or programs using signatures. So you can add this to Bitcoin without changing anything about the protocol. Um, Garbled circuits. This is a new way of creating, again, different way of creating interesting scripts on Bitcoin. You don't have to change how Bitcoin currently works to do this. A lot of projects are using this to build bridges. So if you've heard of something called BitVM, that's a way of bridging Bitcoin to different protocols or different layers. The most recent versions of that are using garbled circuits. And then TEs or trusted execution environments. This is basically a fancy way of doing new things without having to change Bitcoin. The other thing that started really popping off, I would say, last year is quantum. How many of you have heard about the quantum problem? A handful of you. So quantum computers right now are an idea. There's some prototypes that have been built. They're not very powerful. There's a lot of questions in the general physics community as to whether or not these are things that we have to worry about. But there's a general trend across all encrypted communications, Bitcoin included, in terms of if a quantum computer did exist, we would need to change the protocol, the Bitcoin protocol. So there's a lot of work and a lot of new people coming into Bitcoin to help figure out what to do for the reality where a quantum computer exists. They're coming up with new signature schemes and different kinds of math to get an idea about what are the possibilities, how can we change Bitcoin so that you can continue to hold your coins with confidence, even in the case that a quantum computer exists. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna go a little bit faster. Fourth thing, again, said there was 5, this is number 4, permissionless pass. Basically, this is saying people aren't waiting for consensus. This has to do with like the garbled circuits, witness encryption, all of the people building on clients, like rather than trying to work together and come up with a consensus idea as to what we can change Bitcoin into, people are building new projects, proposing new forks, coming up with ways that we can do things using the existing infrastructure of Bitcoin to achieve new things, or even creating like a new eCash, which there's a plan, I think, to fork Bitcoin to make a new project called eCash. I want to say in August. So people are doing what they want, kind of like building on their own or pursuing things that they think are important for the ecosystem. Second layers are continue to build and they keep building. Lightning, we have Arc, which is a new protocol, which is really coming out pretty strongly, I think, recently. eCash has been around for a couple of years now. Rollups, there's new proposals for something called shielded CSV, which would be a more private layer 2. Development is continuing to happen here. Finally, adoption. I'm talking about adoption across like other tech projects and industries. There's recently a new project announced from like a completely different payments ecosystem in the United States. They proposed a new protocol to basically do automated payments whenever you're talking to like an AI agent. They came up with a protocol of how you could pay an agent to do things for you. And what I thought about it was really cool. This is a totally different spec process from what most of what happens in Bitcoin, completely like third party. Um, but they added, so this is their working group protocol that they wrote, and they had a whole section about it. It was how you could use Lightning to do payments, which I thought was really cool. So we're seeing adoption not only, I think, on the ground with all the work that people are doing with circular economies and getting businesses to adopt Bitcoin, but we're also seeing adoption of Bitcoin protocols as a payments method, or at least recognition of it outside in other protocol arenas, which I think is pretty cool. So there's a lot of work happening. Bitcoin's been around for a long time. All that's to say there are still opportunities to get involved. So if you're interested in contributing to Bitcoin technically, there's always places that need help or that you can contribute to. One example is from the conference we did in Brazil this February, down here in Florianopolis. We did a 24-hour hackathon. We had over 20 teams. And in those 24 hours, the teams managed to find 10 bugs in open source Bitcoin projects that had been there for who knows how long. So just 24 hours, a small team of people of varying levels of expertise were able to contribute, I think, in a meaningful way. I like to think there's other low-hanging fruit like that out there. Moments at a time, I want to say thank you, Asante, to all of you coming and all the work that you're doing, contributing to Bitcoin in the work and arena that you do. Oh, there was one more slide. That's okay. Let's go. And I really hope to see all of you at a future conference, maybe at a Bitcoin Plus Plus. We're going to be in Canada next, and then Berlin and South Korea, and we'll be back in Kenya in October the following year. In the meantime, if you would like to keep up with what we're talking about and what's happening in the Bitcoin Plus Plus universe, we have a newsletter. You can get a free year by scanning this QR code, and I hope to see all of you there. So thank you very much for your time and your work.